Alright boys, we are back at it again. Today we are doing a new vehicle tier list. I'm going to tell you what vehicles to use, why you should use them, what vehicles to avoid, and why they are garbage. So, I'm going to be going in order of how they are all listed here. This is an outdated version, so there is no Uber turret, but Uber turret would probably go into A tier. It's very good, but it's only an island. Moving on to the actual list here. Speedboat. Oh, by the way, I also have, as is Supercake, Nova, and Jeb with me, if they have anything to chime in. I don't know where Speedboat goes. I've used it a little bit. It's like the water Jeep. My initial reaction says A tier, because you have good mobility.
It's not quite S tier.
Yeah, it's definitely not S tier. You have good mobility, you have good guns now. The double fusion cannon is pretty good at taking out, destroyers or submarines from a far away distance, or even something that your heat cannon will not one-shot, like Tracker. This will obviously two-shot it. It does two-shot Vortex and Shadow, though. Your other guns, 20mm machine gun is a great generalist weapon now. It got its multipliers buffed versus everything except for aircraft, but aircraft it was very good against anyway. Definitely a great vehicle to use. It's very easy to use as well. It's not difficult to learn. Anti-aircraft turret does its job. I guess I'm just going to put it in A tier. It's not S tier because its range is not where I want it to be personally. But its damage makes up for that. If I had it my way with anti-aircraft turret, it would have more range but less damage. So that way you can engage aircraft from a farther away distance, but you're not dealing as much damage to them. Anti-personnel turret is definitely C tier right now. Just the placement of the turrets, not good. It's very easy to C4 from the air as well. If it was not one-shot by C4, or if it had some form of resistance against it, it would be much better, but its accuracy got nerfed, so it's just very difficult for the placements of the turrets to be effective with them against infantry. Anti-vehicle turret, I'm also going to put in A tier. It's pretty good, but it doesn't do its job against some
It got a recent
vehicles.
damage buff.
Yeah, it got a damage buff, which is nice, but it's still not good enough to beat artillery, which is a hard counter, apparently. And it's still not enough to beat out destroyer one-on-one. Even if you have the force field shield that comes with spawning a turret. If it was able to actually do its job and be anti-vehicle, it would be S tier. So buffing its matchups versus destroyers and artilleries. I mean, it's a base defense turret, and it loses to infantry anyway. So that is why it is A tier. Next up, artillery, instant S tier. Hasn't been touched in a very long time. Its main competitors up there, such as Battle Tank and Vortex and Shadow, have all been nerfed. Artillery has not been nerfed. Its matchups are very good. It can easily beat everything else on this tier list right now. All the turrets and the speedboat. It's able to take out Vortex and Shadow in one shot with both high explosive anti-tank and armor-piercing shells. Its multi-missile launcher, I take that back, it did get touched. Multi-missile launcher did get nerfed, but that wasn't really the most effective tactic available anyway. It was more of the armor-piercing shells, which have not been touched since the model got updated a long time ago. So artillery is definitely S tier. Attack helicopter is also S tier, but I'm going to leave it at the bottom of S tier because the controls are very tedious now. It is a very difficult to use vehicle. I do not recommend this for new players because you have to be holding like W, A, Q, and F all at the same time, and maybe you have to do some keybinds here or there. It's just a very difficult vehicle to use at its maximum potential. It can fly backwards now, which is very good. Flying backwards and be able to shoot at your enemy is a huge perk. So it is S tier, but it's very technical and difficult to use. Next up is ATV. I'm going to put this A tier below Speedboat. It's very good at taking out infantry. It is one-shotted by rocket launchers and takes a lot of damage from every other vehicle in the game. However, it does serve its purpose very well, and it has not been touched in a while. The recent stat change it got was the addition of its flamethrower, and that is not recent at all. That's been there for a few years. Next is Battle Tank. It had a seat swap nerf, so this is going in the bottom of A tier because you cannot utilize both turrets if you only have yourself. You have to have a second player with you in order to make this tank very good like it used to be. Right now it's sitting at A tier because teamwork is not a priority in Base Wars. You're kind of on your own most of the time, so you can't utilize the battle tank's full potential unless you have a friend. Now, if the turret was just removed or you couldn't have a teammate in the tank, it would definitely be C tier. But instead it's A tier because it still has that potential to be great, right? But sometimes you're on your own, so it's very situational. If you have a friend, very good. Bomber is also going in A tier above anti-aircraft turret. Bomber actually beats anti-aircraft turrets now. What you can do is thermobaric bomb them, get them down to 1%, seat swap, and then use the grenade to one-shot the anti-aircraft turret. So now it is able to beat AA turret. It takes very minimal damage from AA turret. It's able to pretty much beat out most of the aircraft if the aircraft don't know what they're doing. Or in the case of Shadow Fighter or Vortex Fighter, you can actually out-heal some of their nose guns with the gunner healing. The vehicles that has harder time with dealing are attack helicopter, artillery, battle tank is another one, and tracker, that is another one as well. It has a hard time dealing with more mobile enemies such as Jeep. It has a really hard time with dealing with Speedboat. Speedboat is probably the most hard counter to bomber you can get because unless the bomber somehow lands a direct hit, which you should not let them even get close to direct hitting you in a speedboat because you're so mobile and it's very easy to use. So Bomber's an A tier because it has good matchups except for the ones I just listed. Jeep is going in... Shoot. I don't know where to put Jeep. I'm going to put it in A. A lot of these vehicles are very good, by the way. The reason why I'm not putting in any in D tier yet, there's one that's going in D tier, is because most of these vehicles are in a pretty good spot. All of these vehicles right here are in very good spots, very good positions. Now, if I had it my way, all of them would be S tier because they would all be usable and they would all have fantastic strengths, but not quite double S tier, right? Jeep is going here because a 20mm machine gun on this thing is ridiculous. You'll be able to beat out pretty much anything except for in artillery if you know what you're doing. You're able to outrun all the other land vehicles. It's very hard for Vortex or Shadow to start hitting you if they're constantly dodging. And if they start hitting you, it probably means they're not dodging very well, and you'll be able to take them out with the rocket launcher or with the 20mm machine guns. Next up is Shadow. Did Shadow get the damage nerf that Vortex got?
No.
Top one.
Yeah, it did.
It did?
It didn't.
I think it did.
No. Tracker or Shadow?
Shadow.
Shadow.
Oh, Shadow did, yeah.
Oh, Shadow did? Okay. Bottom of S tier. It's better than Vortex because it still does damage against infantry. It's very difficult to grind infantry with Vortex now.
The dual plasma balls are still very, very effective against infantry, especially if you hit them direct.
Yes. Shadow model is also very thin, so it's extremely difficult to hit, even compared to Vortex, which is hopefully getting a new model soon to increase its agility, but also increase its front hitbox, kind of like the old model you see right here. But Shadow is definitely worse than artillery, just because its matchup against infantry has been nerfed, and infantry has DK Airburst, which will 5-shot it. So you're going to have to bail out of a Shadow against infantry if you don't have dual plasma equipped. Spawn Truck is going into C tier. It's usable. It's not completely unusable. There's not much else to say. The weapons are mediocre. The gimmick of respawning in the spawn truck kind of sucks unless you have a cloak and you put it in a very good position. Because your spawn force field is not invisible when you spawn in, people are able to spot the spawn truck very easily. Submarine is going in C tier above spawn truck because its matchups against destroyers is very positive if the destroyer is only one person and you're doing this from a distance. Its secondary weapons are not very good, though. Nothing else to say here. Tracker is also going in S tier below Shadow. It's a very good vehicle. Actually, I want to put attack helicopter behind all of these. Like I said, attack helicopter is going in the bottom of S tier because it's very difficult to use. Shadow and tracker are also difficult to use. But tracker just has a lot of DPS, so you're able to get away with flying not at an advanced level. And for that reason, it's going in S tier. Vortex. I'm going to put Vortex below Tracker and Shadow. Now, its matchups against Tracker and Shadow will hopefully get better once this remodel kicks in. But it's damage...
I personally... Oh, you go.
You go.
I personally think that Vortex should be above Tracker because Vortex beats Tracker every single time in a 1v1. Every single time.
I mean, yes, Vortex beats Tracker, but Tracker beats more things than Vortex does. Like, Tracker will be able to beat Battle Tank, Jeep, ATV very easily. It'll be able to beat Bomber when Shadow and Vortex can't out DPS the Bomber's healing, which kind of is terrible. Tracker will be able to take out Speed Mode eventually, as long as you stay far away enough from it, and obviously its matchups against everything in C tier is positive. And Tracker will sometimes beat Artie. I think Tracker and Artie matchup is very even. As opposed to Vortex, you're probably losing against a good artillery player. You're definitely winning against Tracker. You're winning against Shadow unless it's close range. You're winning against Attack Helicopter unless it's long range. Battle Tank, you're maybe winning, maybe not. It just depends on what distance you are at. If you get the jump on them, you're definitely winning because you can shoot their back armor. But if they have a gunner, you're just going to get dropped. Its matchup against Jeep is very difficult. Jeep definitely has an easier time killing Vortex because just the way it can maneuver and dodge and turn and accelerate and decelerate. It can give Vortex players a hard time to land the secondaries, which is what you really want to be using on Jeep. The machine gun does not do a lot of damage to Jeep. On the other hand, Jeep's machine gun will be able to take out Vortex very quickly. Vortex versus anti-vehicle turret, obviously you're winning that. Anti-aircraft turret, it's either going to be a draw because you have a range limit, or it's going to be a loss because you're in flak range. Vortex versus bomber, Vortex should win this, but I don't know why. It usually ends in a stalemate or a draw, whereas Tracker, you'll be able to take out bomber from a distance because your weapons are more powerful. Versus ATV, you probably win this. Versus Speedboat, you're definitely losing. And then versus these three, you're obviously winning. So I think Tracker has a better matchup. I think Tracker wins against everything in A and C tier at the moment, and soon to be B tier and D tier. But it will lose to Shadow, Vortex, and Attack Helicopter.
And artillery.
And artillery. I think it's pretty even, actually. It just depends on what range you're at, again. And you don't have to be within a specific range. Alright, Mac Tank is next. Mac Tank is instantly going into B tier. It's pretty average. It has a great matchup against artillery, but against everything else it's sort of meh. And you only beat artillery when you get to jump on it and when you're using tier 1. Tier 1 is the only useful weapon at the moment.
Tier 5 as well.
Tier 5 is good. It's very effective, but it has like that spin up now. So I think tier 1 is better because you're 3-shotting artillery. But tier 5 is also very good. Helicopter carrier is going into S tier. It's good with one person, but it's fan-fucking-tastic with 3 or more. If you have 3 people, a pilot and 2 gunners, you're really well set. If you have 6 people or 7 people, you're healing constantly. You have 2 gunners and a pilot. So you're almost as nimble as a regular attack helicopter, but with more than double the firepower, and you're almost invincible because you're constantly healing. Very tough to beat that.
And the fact that if any other air vehicle runs into you, they just blow up instantly and die.
You can just ramp kill other aircraft. Destroyer is also going into S tier. Where do I put this guy? Above Vortex, above Tracker. Do I put it above Shadow? I don't know.
I'm gonna say no, just because I don't think it's that effective against ground vehicles compared to Shadow.
Right. Shadow is more effective against ground vehicles, but Destroyer has good matchups pretty much across the board. They're all positive. They're just not all glowing like Shadow's land vehicle matchups are. Very well-rounded vehicle as well, with one person or with three. If you have a three-man Destroyer, you can just set up and camp wherever you want, and you're probably not dying unless 5 people start shooting at you, which is very rare in base wars. And then obviously, aircraft carriers going into D tier. Its weapons suck. Its vehicle spawns are mid. It's very visible. It doesn't have a lot of range. If it was able to set up and like camp outside of the enemy base just for a little bit, it would be great. But it doesn't have any self-healing system. It doesn't have any cover for infantry. Its spawns are whack as fuck. You're just gonna die. It's not a good vehicle. But that is a tier list, as you can see. Most vehicles are in S and A tier because they're all in a pretty good spot. If I had my way with vehicles, I would be buffing Mac Tank's rear armor health a little bit to put it in A tier. I definitely buff anti-personnel turret spawn placements. That's the only thing it needs to be better. Submarine needs primary weapons desperately. If it does not get more primary weapons to replace torpedoes or go into addition with torpedoes, it's not getting above C tier. Spawn truck, either someone needs to figure out a good strategy with it, or the weapons need to be buffed on it so it can defend itself better. That's staying in C tier. Otherwise, an aircraft carrier just needs a total rework. That vehicle is dog shit. The only vehicle I'd nerf right now, probably artillery's movement speed. Do something with the movement speed, because mortar mode is very good with the correct weapons. I would probably nerf its acceleration, so it's slightly less mobile than it is right now. As for Shadow, probably just keep it as is. Just make the model a little bit easier to hit. Destroyer's in a great place. Tracker's in a good place. Vortex, I would just go all in with the whole air-to-air thing. I would redesign its secondary weapons to be slightly less effective against ground vehicles, but far more effective against air vehicles. So you have more air-to-air firepower than a tracker or a Shadow, and you're more agile. Attack helicopter's in a good place. Helicopter carrier's in a good place. Speedboat just needs 1 or 2 very small buffs to make it into S tier. ATV's fine. Bomber is very good at some things it shouldn't be, and very bad at some things it should be good at. Turrets are meh. I'll figure out buffs for those later. Jeep is fine. Battle tank needs seat swap back. At least make it a second, not 3 seconds. 3 seconds is too much. Anti-personnel turret. I already went through all these, right? Yeah. Okay. So that's it. 20-minute video. I will see y'all in the next one. Peace out.